5 minutes.
Thanks, Ceann Corla, and I would like to put on the record and acknowledge the role of Deputy Boyd Barrett in forcing what is a limited discussion, but at least it is getting partially aired. And I totally agree with the points he made that it really is an indictment on our chamber that could have happened without any discussion whatsoever, because these are incredibly serious proposals. Really, what we're debating was the European Commission's latest attempt to introduce greater transparency in the reporting of multinational corporations. And as we've heard, the committee says the proposal doesn't comply with the principle of subsidiarity, which is obviously utter rubbish and wouldn't stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever, and has been exposed even by the arguments that have been heard in the House really as a veiled excuse to cover what are in reality very minor baby steps towards delivering some sort of tax transparency and tax justice. Now, these are enormous issues which have huge implications in Ireland and indeed internationally. And I agree with the submissions made by organisations like Christian Aid that actually the proposals don't go far enough. It was ironic to listen to organisations like IBEC saying they go too far, even stating that these proposals add to what it calls the growing view that the EU is a hostile environment for multinationals. I mean, seriously, I don't think they need to worry about that at all. And in actual fact, if you were here claiming the subsidiarity argument in order to give you more power to go back and argue that actually these measures should go further, it would make some sense. But the fact that you're making the opposite argument is really quite frightening and regrettable, because as Christian Aid have said, it's very difficult to see how these modest proposals are going to do anything really to help developing countries, prevent multinational corporations from shifting their vast profits out of those countries to avoid tax which could have been spent on essential services and fulfilling citizens' rights in those countries. It is a matter of fact that developing countries suffer most as a consequence of corporate tax dodging, which even the IMF have put out a figure of $200 billion annually, a staggering figure which could transform the lives of people. And what the proposals describe as country by country reporting really can't be called that. That's not actually true, because they don't cover every country in which a company might operate. Companies with subsidiaries outside of the European Union and the not on the yet to be defined as non-cooperative tax jurisdiction list, i.e. the tax havens, will only be required to report on an aggregate basis. So that's a fundamental flaw even, or a weakness in the proposal, because putting together jurisdictions where the profit is likely to be shifted to, particularly developing countries and so on, negates the whole entire point of country by country reporting. And I think, the policy should have been to shed light on these things, but if you allow aggregate reporting, the light isn't being shed on it. Another key flaw is obviously that the threshold of reporting is set at 750 million, way too high, and really means that about 90% of multinationals are going to be excluded from this proposal anyway. So it is an incredibly modest proposal, and there is problems with it from the point of view of its inability to deliver enough tax transparency, or indeed to combat the tax dodging that is crucifying developing countries. I thought it was interesting. And the contributions today from the government would seem to indicate that you really are bending the knee really to those who would like to see our pretty precarious or dodgy tax haven-ish status continued on. I thought Price Waterhouse were very interesting when they talked about enterprises need to consider carefully their response to future transparency, and in particular country by country reporting and the way it reflects on allocation of results across value chain. No doubt Price Waterhouse will be there to advise. The last point I would make, Ceann Corla, when we talk about tax avoidance in Ireland, we tend to focus on multinational corporations. I'd like to acknowledge the role, the disgusting role of organisations like Pricewaterhouse, KPMG, Ernst & Young and Deloitte and so on, who really operate on the basis of being one step ahead in facilitating the multinationals in avoiding tax at every turn, whose large headquarters are here, not because they like the weather or because they're doing the accounts for the newsagent, but really because they want to facilitate a continuance of what has prevailed here. I think it's disgusting, and to try and make us special in Europe for these reasons is abhorrent when we don't do it in being best case advocates for refugees or anything like that.
Thank you, Deputy.